In a quiet corner of Tamil Nadu, nestled among age-worn courtyards and tiled roofs, stood the ancestral home of Meenakshi, an elegant woman in her 60s whose grace bore the marks of time, tradition, and sacrifice. The air inside the house always smelled of jasmine garlands, incense, and sandalwood, the scent clinging to carved wooden doors and hand-woven saris hung out to dry. Life moved slowly here, guided by temple bells and the rustling of banana leaves. But one night, as Meenakshi stood before her puja altar lighting a brass oil lamp, a long-held burden returned to her heart with the flicker of the flame. She remembered a night more than 30 years ago, when her daughter Devika had been born, fragile, premature, barely breathing. The doctors hadn't offered hope. Meenakshi had cried beneath the temple's towering gopuram, pleading with the goddess to save her only child. If she lives, she had whispered through her tears, I will offer her hair at your feet. And mine too. But time has its own way of pushing sacred intentions into corners. Devika had grown strong, moved to the city, and the vow was never spoken of again. Until now. The next morning, Devika arrived home on a rare visit, tired from deadlines but eager for comfort. She embraced her mother, poured herself coffee, and settled into the sun-drenched living room.
Meenakshi hesitated, and then, voice soft as silk, confessed the forgotten vow. She expected confusion or perhaps anger. Instead, Devika reached for her mother's hand and smiled. Let's fulfill it together, Amma. Let my hair be offered with yours. A shared promise, a shared gift. Days later, dressed in simple cotton and silk, mother and daughter walked barefoot through the sacred grounds of the Tirumala temple. Pilgrims surrounded them, some with heads already shaved, some waiting in line. Devika and Meenakshi were led to the tonsure hall, where a barber, respectful and experienced, draped cloths over their shoulders. They sat side by side on low stools, fingers entwined. The moment the blade touched Meenakshi's silver hair, time seemed to still. With each careful stroke, decades of memory, fear, and longing fell to the floor in shimmering strands. Devika's dark, shoulder-length hair followed, the sound of the blade like wind cutting through silence. Tears welled in their eyes, not of sadness, but of release. When they rose, their scalps smooth and glowing, sandal paste and vermilion were gently pressed on their crowns. They walked out into the temple courtyard transformed, 2 women, 2 generations, liberated and reborn. The reactions came swiftly. At the railway station, travelers turned their heads, some with surprise, others with admiration. A little girl pointed in curiosity, an elderly woman nodded solemnly. Back in their neighborhood, the whispers started. Some relatives were scandalized. You too, Devika? Her aunt exclaimed at the doorway, eyes wide. Devika only smiled and replied, it was her vow. Now it's our offering. The initial gossip gave way to awe. Neighbors began visiting not to judge, but to listen. One evening, Devika and Meenakshi hosted a circle of women, friends, relatives, acquaintances, who gathered out of curiosity but stayed for something more profound. Meenakshi, with quiet dignity, shared the story. Devika spoke of freedom, ritual, and what it meant to honor tradition not through blind obedience, but through choice. Inspired, Devika posted a picture of their bald heads on social media, captioned, a vow. A bond, a new beginning. The photo spread like wildfire, drawing attention far beyond their quiet town. Messages poured in. You've inspired me to shave for my mother. I'm shaving mine for peace. You've made me see beauty and surrender. Women began sharing their own stories, some rooted in faith, others in healing, mourning, survival. Within weeks, Devika began holding small gatherings, satsangs for women to speak freely, to unburden themselves, to celebrate choices that felt personal and sacred. The living room of their ancestral home was soon filled with shaven heads and stubbled crowns, each one a story, a reclamation, a symbol of unity. A wall of framed photographs grew, showing smiling women of all ages, each one newly bald, each one proud. Meenakshi, now the center of a movement she never intended to start, found herself more alive than ever. The guilt that had haunted her for decades had melted into strength. She would often say with a twinkle in her eye, all my life I feared what people would say if I shaved my head. And now, they come to me for courage. On one particularly golden evening, mother and daughter stood on their rooftop terrace. The sky blushed pink and orange. Below them, temple bells rang out their familiar music. They stood side by side, the last rays of sun kissing their smooth scalps. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Hair would grow back, but the grace, the strength, the shared transformation, they would remain. And so, Vow of the Two Generations became not just a story of a forgotten promise, but a movement of remembrance, of healing, and of women returning to their own sacred power.